Okay, it's 1:30. We have a quorum, and I will call the meeting to order. Welcome to the City of Oklahoma City Board of Adjustments meeting for December 5th, 2024. The agenda documents and minutes can be found at okc.primegov.com. For anyone wishing to be heard today, please fill out a white sheet found at the desk outside the doors and get it to a member of staff. The process for today's meeting will be as follows. Ms. Lakin will call the case number. The applicant or their representative will be recognized to come to the podium, give a brief description of their case. I will then recognize any supporters or protestants who signed up to speak. The next item on the agenda will be to receive the minutes. From the November 21st special meeting. Oh, okay. So then the next is continuous requests and withdrawals.
Do we need to receive the minutes?
They're not ready, so we're going to do it at the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
So we have item number 17, case number 15789 is deferred till January 2nd, 2025. And item number 18, case number 15793 is deferred till January 16th of 2025. And I have a new continuance a new withdrawal on item number 11, case number 15788.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak on any of those? Seeing none, can we get a motion for the continuance requests?
A motion to continue case number 15789 to the January 2nd meeting, 2025 meeting. Motion to continue case number 15793 to the January 16th, 2025 meeting. And case number 15788 to withdraw it from the agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your vote.
You'll have to do it until I can get it. Okay.
And the motion passes. Next, any continuance or withdrawal requests by the public? Seeing none. We'll move to the public hearing. There's nothing on the consent docket, so items requiring separate vote. First case.
So we have item number 1, case number 15791, is a request of SG Mortgage Finance Company for a variance to fence regulations located at 1 Northwest 64th Street.
Hello, my name is Thea Waters, and you need me to state my address, is that correct? My address is 2503 North Kramer Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53211. I'm a project manager at Christopher Kidd and Associates Architects and Engineers, and I'm here today on behalf of our client, Fresenius Vascular Care of Oklahoma City, an affiliate of Azura Vascular Care, which is the new tenant to occupy the subject property located at 1 Northwest 64th Street, owned by SG Mortgage Finance Company, or Finance Corporation. As part of the renovations required to upgrade this existing medical office building to a licensed ambulatory surgery center, an essential electrical system was installed to provide emergency power for the life safety and critical medical equipment within the facility. One component of this essential electrical system is the emergency generator unit mounted on a concrete pad in the front yard of the building. As noted in the staff report, the side and rear yards could not be considered for this equipment due to property line and utility easement constraints. The tenant's usual requirement for an emergency generator is to fully screen and protect the unit from view and vandalism with a gated chain link security fence enclosure with opaque privacy slat inserts to a height of at least 10 feet. The applicable fence ordinance for a front yard in the C3 zoned district allows only a 4-foot maximum fence height with an open, transparent style, which would provide insufficient visual screening and security for the generator unit. The generator itself sits approximately 7 foot 10 inches high off of the concrete slab to the top of the unit. Therefore, the tenant respectfully requests the board for a variance to allow a minimum 8-foot high chain link fence with opaque privacy slats to screen the approximately 300 square foot area of the front yard around the generator. While 8 foot high is not our client's standard and a higher fence enclosure would be desired for more security, the 8-foot minimum height would reasonably alleviate the hardship while being in conformance with the fence height ordinance for rear yards in this and surrounding zoning districts. On behalf of our client, I do have to ask, though, if the board would consider a maximum fence height of 10 feet that would fully alleviate the hardship, and the fence permit application that was submitted by American Fence Company could be amended as such for that 10-foot height. A photo rendering of the allowable versus proposed fence design is shown on the screen at this time. And the fence is proposed as a black chain link style fence with vinyl privacy slats in a color to complement the existing building. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know.
Any questions from the board? So what you're saying is if it's 10 feet tall, it'll fully screen the generator. If it's 8 foot, you'll still see the generator?
8 foot tall fully screens the generator, sir.
Okay. But you still want 10 feet?
10 feet would provide more security for the unit.
I'm not a fence expert, but I mean, I kind of defer over to your expertise as to 10 versus 8, so I'm definitely can get on board with that. I'd love to get y'all's thoughts on it.
And I think the main reason why the fencing ordinance is what it is to not block the building. I think if it's you're blocking it just on that corner, and it's blocking it to, whether it was 8 to 10, I don't think it would matter. Marcus, you have any?
Just going through the conditions in item D, I think I'm going to default to 8 feet just because that would be the minimum necessary. And so that'd be my only reason. I personally don't see a big difference between 8 and 10, but if the problem can be rectified at 8, I don't see a need to go to 10.
Good point.
Emily, you good? No, you good?
And for that purpose, then I will make a motion to approve based off the 8 foot. And then, but motion to approve case number 15791 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Vote when available. And it passes. Thank you,
Thank you very
Ms. Lars.
much, everyone.
Item number 2, case number 15796 is a request of Anton Moore for a variance to the minimum lot size in the AA Agricultural District located at 3020 Oakwood Drive.
Hello, I'm Anton Moore. My address is 1 Southeast 31st Street.
You can lift that microphone up.
Okay,
Pull it up.
first timer. So basically, I purchased this property at 3020 Oakwood earlier in the year. There's already 2 single-family homes on the property. They're actually on different roads. One faces 31st, one faces Oakwood. It is currently zoned as AA, which we know has a 5-acre minimum. So the definition of AA is it basically comes under review once urbanization happens, which you probably already know that. But long story short, everything near us is developing to at least a 1-acre minimum, it seems like. So I'm hoping to split this land, double the tax that brings in, get 2 homes on it as opposed to the 1. I guess that's the majority of it. Currently, it's 5.5. One of them will be 2.59, and the other would be 2.94.
Any questions from the board? And I know properties just to the north of this, there's actually quite a bit of density in another city. And I just question for staff, Sarah, maybe explain the lot split process rather than going through SPUD or PUD.
But this one?
Sarah Welch, Planning Department. So in this case, there are 2 homes on the property, and we actually don't have a zoning district that we could ask them to zone to other than an SPUD. If we have a zoning district that would accommodate the lot size, but it would not, they don't have enough frontage in order to, they'd have to be back before you for a variance if we were to zone them to one of our rural residential districts, or they'd have to seek a SPUD, and in this case, both homes are already there. So.
This process is the easiest.
This process is, well, for sure the simplest if you find that there is indeed a hardship, and then they would be eligible for us to split the lot as long as they meet the other regulations of the zoning district, which they would meet the frontage for AA.
Thanks. No one had signed up to speak on this. Anyone from the audience who wants to speak on it?
No. One.
One? You have to come to the podium. Your name and address.
Hi, Candace Wheeler. Address, you said that? What did you say?
Address.
Address 13729 Southeast 31st Street, Choctaw, Oklahoma 73020. So Anton is my husband, and I'm also a realtor in the Oklahoma City Metro. And I do see the phasing of what he said, which is everything is going into 1 acre, smaller lots around there. And then this particular site is actually built on, each home has their own separate already. So there's a separate house on Oakwood, a separate house on 31st. There's a well and septic and electric already on the Oakwood property as well as on the 31st property. So the goal is to improve the area. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other concerns, questions? So in AA, the minimum lot size would be 5 acres. There's other zoning, but RA2, I believe. RA.
Correct, yeah. Most, not most, I'll say roughly half of the things in that area are RA and the other half are AA.
They both have separate utilities, separate septics, they have over 2.5 acres on each one.
So are you looking to sell one over the other, or are you looking to develop?
So right now, the one on 31st Street, we're renovating with the plan to sell. The older property on Oakwood actually needs a considerable amount of work. Right now, I don't have the funds to address that. So I'm hoping that in the future, either do something else with the land or, if possible, rehab the house.
I'm good.
Will they both take their access off of 31st?
I'm sorry?
They don't both take their access off of 31st?
No, so one is Oakwood directly off of 29th, which is a private road, and then 31st is actually also a private road. So they face different streets and everything. So it would basically be adding a second parcel to the 31st Street property because it doesn't have one currently.
So track B would take its access off of 31st?
Sorry, let me pull it up.
Yes. Yeah, Track Day's driveway is on Oakwood.
Yes.
And B
So-
is down to 31st.
Oh, that's right there. Yeah, so A exists currently, and B would be a new address. And also, I know it probably isn't that relevant, but these are on the literal border of the city. I mean, you cross the street and you're no longer in Oklahoma City, you're technically Choctaw.
Good?
Yeah.
Good motion?
Yeah, motion to approve case number 15796 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And it passes. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Item number 3, case number 15797 is a request of Johnson Associates on behalf of Mega Construction LLC for a variance to height requirements located at 1301 Northeast 30th Street.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates. Address is 1 East Sheridan Avenue. The site before you is getting ready to be developed as multifamily. It's currently zoned R4. It's a straight zoning, not in a PUD or SPUD. And the site has a couple challenges. One being, you can see the cluster of trees that are cutting through the bottom third of the site. There's actually a creek in there that needs to be protected according to FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers. So with that restriction, in addition, the zoning restriction when it comes to building height creates a problem, and that's what we're here for the variance today. So when you look at the surrounding area, what you'll notice is a lot of R1 zoning. And the zoning code, when you're developing R4, puts height restrictions on it, mainly to ensure compatibility between single-family residential and a multifamily project. But the R1 that's actually around us is a school and an active oil well site. So the restrictions that are being placed on the property really are overly burdensome, and in an effort to alleviate that, we believe that Board of Adjustment was the proper route, given that we'll meet all other bulk standards and regulations within the R4 district. So I have just a quick exhibit that just shows the way the R4 height restriction is measured is really within 75 feet of the property. And so when you take all of that out as a spot where buildings can be placed, and then through here, which is where the creek is, it comes down, we're left with essentially being able to construct one-story buildings, except for portions that have no height restriction. So what we're asking for is an allowance of 55 feet across the site, which we're happy to set as the cap, and the areas that don't have one would now have a cap. But that's the application, the request. I'm happy to answer any questions. There was no protests when this went through zoning. We've not received any additional protests today. There's one residence to our north that has a significant tree buffer between the property line and their house. And it's actually a unique property in that it's at the end of a drive off of a city park. So there's no other development potential up there. But happy to answer any questions. We would ask for your approval.
And no one had signed up to speak on this case, and does anyone from the audience want to speak on this? No? Any questions from the board? There's a school, did you mention that, the school to the
Yep.
to
It's
the
class
west?
and SAS, and then an oil
West.
well site on the other side.
Yeah. So the really only R1 is to the north. That
What is at the end of that? It says Northeast 32nd Street and looks to be like a home.
Yeah, that's the house. That's
That's-
behind the park.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's about, what'd you say, about 100 feet from the property?
I mean, it's at least 50. Yeah, it's probably 75. Can you scale it? No. It's over 75 feet away. The other thing I'll note is we are still abiding by the other regulations in R4, which means a minimum 15-foot setback and 5-foot landscape buffer in addition to whatever was on the property before. So
Did you have a site plan? I didn't know if there was on, thought,
we do, I think,
I just wanted to see what
yeah.
the proposal was.
So it's a fairly traditional layout. On the north side, because of where that house is, we put kind of the narrower portion of the building where the units aren't facing. But we've lined it along the outside. We're able to put a building in the common area in the middle. But this is the Blue Line Creek that runs through there that really prevents development from that center piece.
You good?
Yep.
Okay.
Emily, good? No questions?
All right, make a motion to approve case number 15797 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements or the requested variance.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Vote. And it passes.
Thank you.
Mark.
Item number 4, case number 15790, is a renewal application for a special exception of Bruce Norton to allow a mobile home to serve as a temporary second dwelling to relieve a medical hardship located at 11117 Payne Road.
Yeah, I'm Bruce Norton, 11117 South Payne Road. We got my kids living in this house now. We did this last year for the variance because my boy is high-functioning autism, and they help us with him because I work 70 hours a week. My wife's working, and so we had to have somebody with him all the time, pretty much. So that's what the variance is for.
Okay, no one has signed up to speak on this. Does anyone want to speak on this? Seeing none, any questions? This is a renewal.
Do we have to do this every year? Can we extend
No, we
it for
can-
more than a year?
Every 3 years.
3-year maximum, yeah. We can make it a 3-year maximum, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 3-year maximum. That's what we did last, so.
Okay. Make a motion?
Yep.
You good? All right, motion to approve case number 15790 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions for a term of 3 years.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote. And it passes. Thank you.
Item number 5, case number 15799, is a request of Laney Taylor and Spencer O'Reilly for a variance to building regulations in the R1 Single Family and Silver Lake Urban Conservation located at 94.
Afternoon. I'm Spencer O'Reilly. The address is 9416 Horseshoe Road, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73162. I'm requesting a variance for an accessory structure to be placed 8 feet behind the rear building line of the main structure. Our house is located in an urban conservation district because it is lake adjacent. The regulation, the interpretation I believe is in place. I'm currently on the board of the Silver Lake HOA, and from speaking to my fellow board members, my interpretation of this rule is that it is there to protect the sight line. So no one can place an accessory structure that is obstructing another neighbor's sight line to the lake. The accessory structure that I am attempting to place is actually replacing an existing accessory structure. So there's no change in the obstruction, and there's no existing obstruction in the first place because you'll find towards the end of the photo exhibits, you can see that my neighbor's adjacent property, his rear main line is actually behind the accessory structure. So I'm asking for a 8-foot variance on placing the accessory structure.
And no one had signed up to speak on this. Anyone from the audience want to speak on this case? Seeing none. Anything from the board?
I have a couple of questions. I just want to confirm. There's an existing structure on
Yes.
there, right? What is it currently used for?
It's currently essentially a garden shed because the previous owner let it fall into disrepair. At some point, it looked like it was a functioning guest house. It had plumbing, electrical, etc. None of it is currently functioning, which is why I'm attempting to replace it.
And you're going to replace it with what type of structure?
Just an accessory structure. It's going to be in my office, essentially. I work from home full-time.
So you would restore the plumbing and all of that?
Yes, I'm going to restore the plumbing and electrical and drain line to it.
Right. But it's not going to have a kitchen, it's not going to be an ADU, it's an
No, it doesn't
accessory
have a
structure.
kitchen. It's just
Right.
accessory.
It's not full-time living. And a lot of the properties over there have little cottages, which a lot of those little cottages were the first properties on there.
Right.
I grew up right around here. The same height, the new structure?
Yeah, I think it's actually going to be slightly shorter. It currently has a very tall A-frame on the roof line.
As far as length and width, is it pretty comparable to the existing one?
It's a little bit longer. There is a proposed site plan a couple of pages back. You can see that is the proposed placement of the accessory structure. It's, I want to say it's going to be larger by maybe 250 square feet, roughly.
But it still won't impede your neighbor's line of sight?
I'm sorry?
It's not going to impede your neighbor's view, I
No,
guess?
if you scroll back towards the end of the photo exhibits, you can actually see where the existing, go back one, I believe. No, sorry, forward two. Right there, you can actually see that brick wall is my neighbor's adjacent property.
Okay.
That is their primary structure, so the existing accessory structure is behind their house.
And did you say you were on the HOA board?
I am.
So you've
Yeah, I've
communicated with them?
I've spoken to all my neighbors, they're all fine with it. No one had any objections.
Anything else? Good.
Motion to approve case number 15799 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6, case number 15782, is an application by Doss Garrison to allow home sharing located at 2242 Northwest 31st Street.
Good afternoon, I'm Doss Garrison, here in regards to property at 2242 North Street. Here for our application for special exception for home sharing. My wife and I have been operating this house as an Airbnb for about a little over 3 years now. We haven't run into any issues. We have good relationships with all of our neighbors. Had the house rented out pretty much every week. We just weren't aware that we had to come in for the special exception, so that's why I'm here now. But yeah, haven't had any issues, and we were here a couple weeks ago for our other property that you all approved. Open for approval today.
No one had signed up to speak on this. Does anyone from the audience want to speak on this case? Seeing none, anything from the board? You do have one protest in the packet. I don't know if you have a copy of that.
I do not, no.
She can get you a copy and just reach out to them, just
Okay.
communicate, just another neighbor so they know and they have your contact.
Will do.
How many bathrooms are in this home?
I'm sorry?
Number of baths.
Never.
2.5.
So 4 and 2.5, 4 beds, 2.5.
4 beds, yes.
It's just that you have 12 guests, maximum of 12 guests on this.
Yes.
Can you tell us how you get there?
I'm sorry?
How do you get there?
The sleeping arrangement.
Oh, okay, so we have 3 queen beds in 3 of the bedrooms, and then our 4th bedroom has 2 fulls and 2 twins.
So the 12 is not a accounting for a sofa bed or anything like that, is that correct?
No, we do not have a pull-out sofa.
So for me, I just like to see 2 per bedroom and then plus 1. And it's just to accommodate the sleeping in an arrangement that is more applicable to what the house was designed for. With 4 beds, 2.5 baths, I could do 9.
Could I request 10 for our property 2 weeks ago? It's the same amount of bedrooms and bathrooms, and I was wondering, you all approved of 10. I was wondering if we could do 10 for this property as well.
I was going to say 10, only because
I knew you
we're
were,
not,
so I went
we're
9.
not doing a sofa bed. So it's a little bit different. I do have a little bit of heartache at the fact that it's been rented for 3.5 years. Not necessarily pleased about that. You know, I'm looking here for a term of 1 year. Don, you're the car Nazi here.
Yeah,
So
I kind of went with maximum of 4.
that's what it says.
Maximum
on
of 4 vehicles.
Yes.
And then a caveat to that would also be no on-street parking during the quiet hours.
Okay.
So no overnight parking on the street.
Okay.
Quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. Anything else?
I'm good with that.
I'm okay? Good.
Motion to approve case number 15782 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements or the requested special exceptions with the following modifications. Maximum number of guests shall be 10 for a term of 1 year, 4-car maximum, no on-street parking, quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., and the no on-street parking tied to the quiet hours.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote when available. It passed, thanks.
Thank you.
Item number 7, case number 15784 is an application by Rikia LLC to allow home sharing located at 2320 Northwest 47th Street. And this was the one that I laid the protest on that we got in the mail, and she hasn't received, she's getting a copy.
Appreciate you. Hi. So this home was, I think, ran by the previous...
Your name and address, please.
Okay. Ava Misheva, owner of Ricky LLC. I think this home's been like Airbnb for years now, but the previous owner did not apply for any licenses or anything. We just purchased it, I think, a few months ago. We did a full remodel on the house, and we're just trying to make the things correct and get the license for it. So I know that the neighbor on one of the sides of the house is at home 24/7, and from my understanding from the previous owner that she doesn't like that. So what we did to some kind of accommodate probably the neighbors who may have certain needs is that we started having longer reservations in this property. So basically, a lot of the reservations are 4 to 30 nights or more. So that way, hopefully, we can make sure that those owners feel a little more comfortable, that there's more consistent person at the property. And hopefully that's going to help them to start seeing this in a little bit different manner.
Okay. And we did have someone sign up to speak on this case.
Okay.
A Jacob Theobald.
Hello, my name is Jacob Theobald. I live at 2328 Northwest 47th Street. It's 2 doors down from the property in question. I wanted to voice my position to this for a few reasons. On a micro level, there's been just kind of vague annoyances here and there. People leaving overfull trash cans out that the wind takes it, trash gets blown everywhere. Those things happen, not a huge deal. Weird things where recently, I believe an auto dealership rented this property for about a week and a half and had anywhere from 8 to 12 cars parked in the driveway throughout the street, ongoing for that entire time, which is kind of odd. To more problematic things where certain tenants or rentees or Airbnbers, whatever you want to call them, have harassed neighbors to the point that I believe some of them have called the police or called, it was the previous owner, but have had to contact the previous landlord and say like, hey, people are actually harassing me and partying and beating on my door at late hours of the night. And then on a macro level, we live in an economy where housing is increasingly unaffordable. And I can't, in good conscience, not oppose something where someone owns a house and does what I consider to be the worst type of rent seeking, not even renting a house for someone full time, but to own a property that is explicitly going to be not fully occupied when people, friends and family my age and younger, can't even afford houses. In a neighborhood such as mine, which is full of older homes and starter homes and things that should be eminently affordable for people like themselves. So, thank you.
Thank you. And if you would answer those questions that he had.
So I didn't fully understand what your question was on that. Did you?
The number of cars and
In general, we allow just 3 vehicles because we have a 2 parking garage and our driveway holds 6. I'm sure with the extension of amount of days which we put in now, that should assist this because a lot of the people who book for longer periods of time, they're not so many people, you know, they're not looking to do neither a party or. And you see probably around the holidays, more people who gather like we all do, right? So you're going to see more cars.
would you address us? Thank you.
Okay, you're going to see more cars probably there. And, you know, this is the part where I don't mind having my phone number to all the neighbors and you can contact me and I'll get that taken care of.
Yeah. So if you would, give him your contact
Absolutely.
number so that he can have that.
Yes.
And so some questions from the board. And I think we could maybe even put a longer term on it if she was willing, as far as nights rented.
Well, it's up to her. For me, I'm trying to figure out how you're asking for 8 people. You have 3 rooms. Tell me how you get to 8 people.
So in general, it's a king bedroom and two bigger beds, which would hold, you know, 2 people each. So I'll consider that 7 for the king bed, and then we have an air mattress. Our area in the king bedroom is pretty big, so they could put for their kid or whoever might be the extra person. This is why it's 8. But most likely, from what I see, it doesn't get rented for more than 6. 3 to 6 people would rent it, most likely. This 8 option is just if they have kids, most likely they'll have, you know, if it's a family of 2 and another family of 2 and they have 4 kids or something like that, would be a good option to have 8.
So do you have one room that has 2 beds in it?
No, it's got a king bedroom, and the king beds are pretty big. So if you have a family and 2 small kids, they most likely will sleep with the mom and dad, how everybody knows they do. And then we have a queen and a full bedroom, which is 2 each. So I'll think would would be a good option for 8 if they have a kid or 2 or a few kids with them.
And then, so your additional 2 are out in the living room?
We have an air mattress, so if they want to use that, they can. But I haven't seen it open. You know, we haven't been operating for that long yet, but haven't seen it open.
Okay.
For me, I'd like to see a maximum of 6 on this for the first term.
Okay.
For the first term.
Yeah.
How many vehicles?
4. And no on-street parking during the quiet hours, which I
Okay.
would like to see quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Sure. Do you mind doing 7 if it's possible? To do 7 so I can accommodate another kid? If you could.
Air mattress.
I mean, 7's fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We ready?
Anyone else? Good.
Okay. Motion to approve case number 15784 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exception with the following modifications. Maximum number of people at 7, quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. No on-street parking tied to those quiet hours. 4-car maximum, and for a term of 1 year.
We have a motion and a second. Vote. And it passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure you get his contact.
Item number 8, case number 15785 is an application by Jay Gallagly on behalf of Bolt Out Solutions LLC to allow home sharing at 435 Northwest 12th Street.
Hello, Jay Gallagly, address 1309 Glenbrook Terrace, 73116. We're here on behalf of Bolt Out Solutions to get 2 different home sharing. They're in the same building, so the first one we're discussing, I believe, is Unit B.
Okay, no one had signed up to speak on this. Is there anyone from the audience who wants to speak on this case? Seeing none. Any questions? On the parking, is there just designated parking for that parking?
Yeah, so in the
lot?
back, you can kind of see the spaces available there. The building's not that old, so at some point it had to get approved, as a building for parking. It's a little bit odd how they have them kind of stacked like that, but it seems to work just fine. Cars can kind of get in and out. There's an alleyway kind of on the north side there that makes it easy to get in and out. I'm sorry.
Are the spots designated for each unit or just?
Yeah, there's one. I'm Cody, his wife. There's one row, so it's 2 tandem spots, 3 rows of 2 tandem, so a total of 6 spots back there. So there's one unit, Unit C, that has been sold, and so they're permanent tenants, and they have 2 of those spots, so 1 row, and then the other ones are available for guests.
And that one that's been purchased, they have our direct number. If there's ever any issues, they just let us know. And
Yeah.
we handle it quickly. So we've never had any issues with the unit that's been sold.
We had one question. We have a maximum number of 4 on there. There's a flex space on the 3rd level. It's a pretty large condo with 2 closed off bedrooms, but on the 3rd level, there's a closed off bedroom and a flex space and a bathroom off of that. We wondered if it would be okay to put just a bunk bed in that flex space so that it would be a total of 6 guests. It's about a 2,200 square foot unit, so it's pretty large, and that flex space is not used for anything else. It could be an office, but just in case a couple of kids, their parents could be in one room and a couple kids in the flex space. So we're hoping we could get 6 in that unit.
But the unit itself is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, is that right?
It's a 2.5 bath.
And 2.5 bath?
Let's go good, in my opinion. 5 is fine. I cannot get behind 6.
That's fine.
So going back to the parking spaces, are they designated or is it just a?
There's
first come-
one row that's designated, and then the other ones, we can designate per unit. So we
So-
can do signage if needed.
So the one that is reserved for the permanent tenant, we have a sign, and also on the concrete reserved. So it's
Okay.
well designated for those people.
And how many spaces are there? 2? Are there 2?
Yeah.
Do you own the entire building?
No, we're here on behalf of
Bolt
Friend-
House.
Friends, but Bolt House Solutions is their LLC.
So are you the manager?
Yeah.
Correct.
And there's 5 units?
Yeah, there's one commercial in the front, a really small commercial unit, and then there's 4 residential.
4 residences? So I'm having trouble trying to figure out how many vehicles, but I think I'm at 1. And then they could just park on the street too, right?
Yeah, there's parking on the street.
Yeah, 12th Street is not a very busy street, and actually the lot to the east is also just a green space. So 12th Street is pretty accessible, and that's what honestly most people do, since it's kind of an urban area. A lot of people don't have a car, and it's very walkable. It's real close to coffee shops and restaurants and things, so just out of ease for a lot of people, they park there anyway, but these spots are designated for them.
So if you had designated spots, how many could you afford to each unit? 1 or 2?
Well, what we were thinking is 1 row per unit.
Okay.
So that you're not blocking in another guest in a different unit. So you could offer these, 2 tandem spots for unit B and 2 tandem spots in the back for unit E.
And then the permanent residents have 2 tandem spots as well, which would equal the 6 in the picture.
So the other residents, what is it? So you're one to
Oh,
put,
the owners of the building own that, so they're not there. They have that unoccupied.
but my
So they're-
theory on the 1 was that they would be taken away. The rest of the parking would be available to the renters, and there's 1 more unit that wouldn't have any parking. And when I went by there, the people were parking on the street, and it's in the core, so I didn't have really a big problem with street parking.
I don't think I've ever heard those words come out of your mouth.
I don't think so either.
There's never not been a spot right in front of there.
Yeah.
I'm just
There's
going
al-
to say parking in designated areas, if you choose to designate spots. Obviously, your quiet hours are going to be adjusted from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. because that's what we've done for everybody, term for 1 year. Otherwise, I'm ready to make a motion. We good? All right. Motion to approve case number 15785 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions with the modifications that quiet hours will be from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. Maximum number of guests at 5, a 2-car maximum, parking in designated areas for a term of 1 year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And it passes.
Thank you.
Item number 9, case number 15786, is an application by Jay Gallagher on behalf of Bolt Out Solutions LLC to allow home sharing at 435 Northwest 12th Street, Unit E.
The same situation, but this one is a
Could
pretty
you just
straight.
give your name and address?
Oh, yeah,
for-
sorry. Cody Gallagher,
Thanks.
1309 Glenbrook Terrace.
And this is the same?
Yeah.
Same size,
Same, yeah.
2
And
beds?
we only need 4 in this one, 4 guests.
So, yeah, this one sits right above the commercial unit, kind of in the front of the building. It's a little bit smaller, same number of bedrooms.
And no one had signed up to speak. Did anyone want to speak from the audience on this case? No? Any questions from the board?
Ready?
Ready
Good.
for a motion?
All right. Motion to approve case number 15786 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions with the following modifications. Maximum number of guests at 4, quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., 2-car maximum parking in designated areas for a term of 1 year.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote when available. And it passes. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Item number 10, case number 15787, is an application by Nathan Rex to allow home sharing at 1604 Northwest 45th Street.
Hello, Nathan Rex, 4613 Northwest 160th Terrace. Hello, folks. My name's Nate. Here for a home sharing exemption for a home we lived in for about 14 years. It's a single-family home. It's 4-bedroom, 2-bath. We have 1 king bed, 2 queen beds, and the 4th bedroom is kind of set up for a kids area with a full-size bed and a twin bed. As you can see here from the photos, parking is pretty good for our location in this neighborhood. You could fit 4 full-size vehicles under that covered parking space there. Plan is to have no more than 3 vehicles. One more thing, in the rules section, I indicated quiet hours from 10 to 9. I understand you guys are approving 9, so would have no problem with that, but open to any other questions.
No one had signed up to speak. Does anyone want to speak on this case? Nope. Anything from the board?
Can you tell me again, in the bedrooms, what's the bed situation?
So we have the master bed has a king bed in it. 2 of the bedrooms have queen size beds. The last bedroom has a full size and a twin size bed.
And how many bathrooms are in this home?
2 full size bathrooms.
The room that's got the 2 separate beds, I mean, is it a standard room or is it a larger room? What's the situation there?
It's basically a bunk bed, full on the bottom and then twin up top.
So are we getting to 9 people?
Double occupancy for each bed except for the twin.
It also has a pull-out. I don't know if
I
that
got
makes
9.
any difference. In the living room does have a pull-out
4.
sofa.
What are you comfortable with, 9 or 10?
9.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. 4 beds, 2 baths, 9 people. There's 9 beds, bed space.
All right. I'm going to go with 9 for this first year. I don't know if I can get to 10 with only 2 bathrooms, so that's I'm struggling with. How about parking? How many vehicles?
We can easily fit 4 full-size vehicles. I drive a 1-ton pickup truck, and you could fit my truck backed in and then even pull my wife's Tahoe right in front of it. But I want to limit the vehicles to 3 at most.
Okay. And no on-street parking overnight.
Correct, yeah, no on-street parking. We we're extremely close with our neighbors. The folks across the street are kind of like my kids' Oklahoma grandparents. To the left, Patrick and Sherry, they've been there for 30 years. A lot of really close friends and around, and we're really tight with them. And they would surely let us know if there's any issues. So,
All right.
Ready for a motion?
Sure. Motion to approve case number 15787 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions with the following modifications: quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., maximum number of people at 9, 3-car maximum, no on-street parking tied to the quiet hours, and for a term of 1 year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote when available. And it passes.
all right, thank you guys. Quick question though, next year, just come back, go through the same process?
You'll get notified
All
via
right,
email.
very good, thank y'all.
Item number 11 was withdrawn. Item number 12, case number 15792, a special exception of Golden Sunrise Homes LLC to do home sharing at 4416 Northwest 31st Street.
Doesn't look like we have an applicant. Yep, yes, we do. He was hiding back there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Dong, address 4416 North Indiana Avenue, Oklahoma City 73118. So I'm here seeking for short-term rental for 1 year for the house located on Northwest 31st and Meridian. So this house has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms with 1 attached garage. So we have 1 king bed, 1 queen bed, and 2 twin beds, so total 4 beds. And we instruct the guests to park in the garage and on the driveway as much as possible. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
And no one had signed up to speak. Does anyone want to speak on this case? Seeing none, any questions from the board?
How many cars can you fit in the driveway and in the garage?
So the garage can fit in 1 car, driveway, depending on the size, I think 1 to 2 cars on the driveway.
2.
2-car max?
Yeah. No, well, 3-car max if they use the garage.
Okay.
You did say the garage was available for
Yes,
a car?
it's
I
available.
wasn't sure.
Okay. Ready?
Pretty simple. Good. Ready for a motion?
Motion to approve case number 15792 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions with the following modifications. Quiet hours are from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., 3-car maximum, no on-street parking tied to the quiet hours, and for a term of 1 year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote when available. And it passes.
Thank you so much.
Item number 13, case number 15794, is an application for a special exception by Annette Ellis to allow home sharing at 300 Northwest 92nd Street.
Good afternoon. I'm Annette Ellis. My address is 512 Northwest 157th Street. That's in Edmond, Oklahoma, 73013. And today, I am here looking for an approval for an exception for the property at 300 Northwest 92nd Street in Oklahoma City. The property itself is a 3-bedroom home. It has 1.5 bath. It has a 2-car garage and a covered patio. There's plenty parking in the garage, of course, and in the driveway, and there is off-street parking too, on-street parking, I guess you would call it, also available. The home has been always well-maintained. Only family members have stayed in the home for a period of 39 years. And as we speak, the pictures that I had already presented to the board We have already started remodeling it. We put in a new roof, gutters, new garage door, painted the inside garage. The whole house on the inside is painted. We put in wood floors, tile, and new appliances. I think a short-term rental, it would be more feasible for the neighborhood instead of a long-term, because it seems like sometimes long-term rentals can be a less desirable outcome sometimes on a long-term basis. My husband and I, we live in Edmond, Oklahoma, and it's not that far from the property if any problems was to occur. And we're retired, of course. The house, we plan to put in 2 queen beds and 2 twin beds, which would sleep a total of 6 people. Any questions? There will also be restrictions applied to the home. And of course, the quiet time and no drugs, no loud people around and partyings and large events, that kind of thing.
Okay. No one had signed up to speak on this case. Was there anyone from the audience who wanted to speak on this case? Seeing none. Any questions from the board?
How many vehicles can fit without parking on the street itself?
Well, I know there's 2 can go in the garage because it's empty. And I would think maybe 4 on the outside.
Yeah, 2 comfortably.
In the
And
driveway.
you only have 6 guests, so I would go with the 4-car maximum.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Good. Ready for a motion?
Motion to approve case number 15794 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions with the following modifications. A 4-car maximum, no on-street parking tied to the quiet hours in the application, and for a term of 1 year.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Vote when ready. And it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 14, case number 15795, is an application for special exception by Shorty's Place Property Management LLC to allow home sharing at 10704 Sunset Boulevard.
Good afternoon. My name is Esther D. Blaine, my husband Richard Blaine, and our business is Shorty's Place Property Management LLC. And I'm here today to see.
Can you give us your address?
My address is 7924 Northeast 129th Street in Jones. The property that we are trying to do home sharing, renew our application, 10704 Sunset Boulevard in Spencer, Oklahoma.
Tell us a little bit about it. I do remember you from the first time you came too, but tell us a little bit about what you're planning to do with it.
We have a 2-bedroom there, no garage, and we plan on doing short-term rental. We own the property now for probably 20 years or better, but the long-term, people just tear it up really bad. So we're trying to see if we can do home sharing for short-term rental and have little family gatherings or functions after funerals or whatever they need it for. Us on 2.5 acres of land, got plenty of parking, and we just want to renew our home sharing license. We had it for 1 year last year, and we back to see if we can get it. We have not had any problems, thank the Lord. It's out in the rural Spencer area in the country. So that's what we're here for today.
Okay. No one had signed up to speak on this. If anyone from the audience who wanted to speak on this case? Seeing none. Any questions from the board?
You have 2 bedrooms. What's the sleeping arrangement in the home?
It's got 2 full beds in both bedrooms, and then we have an air mattress for the living room if they have children, or they can pull out the sleeper sofa.
So I'm going to follow what we've been doing, but I'm going to say 2 per bedroom and then the 1 for the living room for 5 people.
5.
Quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have not had any problems. I've been living out there over 70 years. I'm 70 years old. I was born and raised in that neighborhood, and everybody knows me. Have not had any problems with our neighbors. Well, I got an acre of land in between me and the neighbors out there.
And this is a little bit different than a normal single-family home in a neighborhood where it's closer. And so I did want to know how it was working out with the events that were going on during the day. You had no protests and no neighbors came up, so I
No.
assume that.
Well, the neighbors come up, but they wanted to join in with the party and eat, drink, and be merry. Yes, we all close-knit in that area. I've been there all my life, and I'm 70 years old. I was born and raised there.
I think the only thing to point out is the fact that your special exception, your initial one, expired in July, and had you applied timely before that expiration, I think we would have granted a longer period. So for this time, we're going to do 1 year again, but be sure to come back here before you expire next year, and you'll get longer.
Well, back then in July, my disabled, handicapped child had congestive heart failure. He was in the hospital, and thank God he's still alive. So we was battling health conditions with our son. That's 100% disabled.
Yeah. You had
And I
other
did.
things, right?
Excuse me?
You had other things that took priority.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Medical priority.
Yeah.
But we did renew our license over in we renewed our license back then, I think.
Yeah.
But when he had the congestive heart failure, they wasn't expecting him to live. We was at the hospital, so nothing I could do.
No, you're good.
So
Right.
I would ask you to make that special exception to grant us a little bit more time with it, because we still going through right now with him.
I'm going to stick to we've done this for everybody, so we're trying to stick to the same procedure for everyone and treat everyone the same. So it will be 1 year, but I'm glad that your son's doing well.
So you're gonna renew it 1 year, then I come back and again?
If you come back here in a year and it's timely, you'll get
Yes,
longer.
sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Motion to approve case number 15795 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions with the modifications that quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., maximum number of people at 5, and for a term of 1 year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote when ready. And you passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Item number 15, case number 15798 is an application for special exception of Jonathan Davis of Series 4, a series of 3D Cribs LLC, to allow home sharing at 1719 Oso Avenue.
Hello, Libby Ross with Co-host Oklahoma. We're here for Oso Avenue, and I think this has been up and running for, right now, this was his second permit. I have been managing it now for maybe about 2 months, so seems to be going good.
No one had signed up to speak on this. Did anyone want to speak on this case? Seeing none, any questions from the board?
How many vehicles is it on here?
I think we have 4 on there. We can get 2 in the garage and 2 in the driveway.
Can you put 2 in the driveway? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, being the dead end, I think, well, even the neighbor to the left there, she parks in the driveway quite a lot, but that dead end, it kind of,
Yeah, not a lot of traffic for sure.
no.
And there were no protests and no code violations.
No.
So are we still within the renewal period?
Yeah.
It says it expires on January 5th. So we're good?
Yep.
So are we doing a 3-year?
Yeah. I mean, I was good with 3.
Okay. We ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion to approve case number 15798 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exceptions with the following modifications: quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., four-car maximum, no on-street parking tied to the quiet hours, and for a term of 3 years.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote when ready.
Thank you.
And it passes. Thank you. We've come to the end of our agenda.
Item number 16, case number 15736 is an appeal by Lamar Central Outdoor LLC and Byron's Liquor Warehouse of the decision of an administrative official regarding the issuance of a sign permit Broadway Avenue.
Welcome, Mr. Hickman. You look familiar.
Good afternoon. Bill Hickman, Hickman Law Group, here on behalf of the applicants, Lamar Outdoor Advertising, PSG Rentals, and Byron's Liquor Warehouse. Clients are here in the room, should you have any questions for them, but in an effort to be as brief and respectful of your time, they're not going to speak this time. Many of y'all have heard them speak in prior opportunities when we've been here before you. And so if you have any questions for them, please know that they are present. Also put a slide deck together just to kind of go more expeditiously through the exhibits that have been previously submitted. I believe when I looked at the record, there was over 500 pages of exhibits and documents that had been submitted in this case. And I believe you've heard us speak, the 3 of the 4 of y'all at least have heard us speak for 3 to 4 hours on this case in prior hearings. So I'm going to try to be respectful of your time and hit on the key points. And if I need to rebut anything or follow up, I'm happy to do that as necessary. So the first couple things I want to talk to you about, it's really to lay the foundation for the way in which the interpretation of this ordinance should be considered. And first and most, the first of which is the fact that the purpose of this article, one of which is to implement the comprehensive plan. That's item number 2 here. And if you look at the next slide, it tells you that in the comprehensive plan under Rich OKC, one of the new efforts to reduce sign clutter is to restrict new billboards and eliminate or reduce the number of existing billboards. And I mention this to you just as you're looking at this through the lens of ensuring compliance with the terms of the ordinance, we are to look at this in a restrictive way as far as allowing new billboards. And if you go on to the next slide, you can see part of the purpose and the findings in the sign ordinance section here in section 59-16101 is to ensure that the type and dimensions and setbacks and physical design of the signs are permitted to ensure the protection of the city's interest in traffic safety, community character, and aesthetics. And the uncontrolled use of signs in their location could be harmful to the traffic and public well-being and be in conflict with the other objectives. And so, as you've heard from the representatives of Byron's Liquor Warehouse, for example, that is a very ongoing and active store with lots of cars and vehicles and individuals coming in and out of. There are concerns that they have expressed to you about those safety concerns relating to transportation, traffic safety, pedestrian safety, as well as the impact on the community and the aesthetics of the local area. If you could go on to the next slide, which talks about the applicability. So this one really deals with when we are talking about is there any conflict between the regulations in the sign ordinance and regulations in a design district, zoning overlay district, or historic preservation district, which is the key one here. The more restrictive regulation, like in the historic preservation district, is the ones that should prevail. And then finally, under the particular aspects of the sign ordinance itself, when it talks about the general rules of interpretation, it says that this title establishes the minimum requirements adopted for the promotion of public health, safety, and welfare. Again, as I mentioned before, you've heard that this sign is proposed to be placed adjacent to a large ongoing retail establishment, and there are concerns about public safety. Furthermore, it talks about when a requirement of this article varies from another provision of this title or any other duly adopted city ordinance or any duly promulgated rule or regulation of the city, they're more restrictive or that imposing the higher standard applies. So I want to pause here and say, go through these 3 points with you about the comprehensive plan, about these rules of interpretation, about the public safety aspects of the underlying consideration of this sign ordinance to say, if in doubt, you should interpret the ordinance in the more restrictive way, which would be not to allow the billboard sign that is proposed. That is what the ordinance, the guidance that the ordinance provides itself on the face of the ordinance document. So what is the key issue here for your consideration? And really it deals with section 5916111. And this is the spacing from districts or uses, not the spacing between signs, but spacings between districts or uses. And in particular, section 3 says no billboard shall be constructed, erected, placed, or replaced closer than 300 feet to the nearest HL or HP zone property. There's 2 parts of that sentence that I'm going to break down for you and go through in a little bit more detail. The first part is the word billboard. It is a defined term. And you see in the definitions in the sign ordinance, a billboard is defined as a sign or sign structure upon which advertising may be posted, painted, or affixed, and which is primarily designed for the rental or lease of the sign space for advertising not related to the use of the property upon which the sign is located. So a billboard is a sign or a sign structure. A sign or a sign structure are also defined terms in the sign ordinance. In particular, the definition of sign structure makes it very clear that a sign structure or a billboard is any combination of materials to form a construction for the purpose of attaching, fixing, or otherwise supporting a sign, whether installed on, above, or below the surface of the land, a building, or any other solid surface. So the sign structure, or in other words, the billboard, is any part of the structure, whether it's installed on, above, or below the surface of the land. And you'll see in a minute why that's important when I show you the survey that you have maybe previously seen. But going on to the next slide, why is it important that it's not the center of the pole but from the sign structure? Because this picture illustrates how signs can be designed in what we call a flag unit. And a flag unit is where the exterior portion, or the portion where the advertisement is actually placed on the sign structure, protrudes away from the center of the pole. And that could be anywhere from 10 to 50 to 100 feet. And so if we were to measure from the center of the pole as a setback from some protected area, like in this instance, an historic preservation area, how you would not actually be achieving that objective of having the setback away from the protected area if you measure from the center of the pole and not actually the sign structure, including the portion, as you see in this picture, that is above ground that protrudes to the right. If you look at the next slide, you can see how even the city has interpreted the same way. And in a response to a request by Lamar, the city's development services people actually stated in the general comment section that the 25-foot setback is from the closest point to the sign face, not the sign pole. And in the picture, if you go back one slide, please, the sign face is the portion in the upper right-hand corner where there is no facing up there right now, but that's where the facing would be to the farthest to the right. And so it was not, the city was not telling Lamar this 25-foot setback from the pole, but from the sign face, which is the farthest portion of the structure protruding in that picture towards the truck that you see there up on the hillside. If we go on one more slide, you can see that also on this particular application, the city has made note, a couple of things here, that although this site is not located in the design district, there is an ordinance requirement concerning minimum separation between the HP zoned property and billboards, which is, again, the language and the words we see in the actual ordinance. And if you skip down there, you see under the word, next to the word note, it says that the zoning lines go to the center of the street right-of-way, per Laura Griggs, and that's her phone number. So we have the city themselves saying in the notes, on this particular application, that the minimum separation is between the HP zoned property and the billboard, and that the zoning line for that HP zoned property goes to the center line of the street right-of-way. So we have the city itself both telling Lamar that we measure from the sign face, not the sign pole, and then the notes saying that the minimum separation is between the HP zoned property and the billboard, and that the zoning line goes to the center of the street right-of-way. If you look at the next slide, please. This is Lamar's, survey that we have shown to you previously. I also have handouts, but I have a blow-up that hopefully might help as well. And what I want to point out on the blow-up, right here you can see is the billboard structure. Now, their argument is that it goes from the center of the pole. And from the center of the pole, you can see it goes right to the edge of the curb. But it goes past these other two lines that I'm going to talk to you about here in a minute. That's the second part of that sentence, which is the zoned property, which is indicated by the black dashed line here, which is the Winans Park Addition plat, and then the green curve line, which represents the HP boundary per the city ordinance. Only by measuring from the center of the pole do you get to the edge of the curb, and even then you're still going beyond the area that's the zoned property and the HP boundary. But if you go from the edge of the sign structure, it goes well into the grassy area close to the fire station and well beyond the curb and well beyond the zoned property and well beyond the HP boundary. The only way you can find that there is the spacing required is if you agree with the applicant, I guess, that you should measure from the center of the pole and only to the edge of the curb. Neither one of those interpretations are consistent with the actual language in the ordinance, because the ordinance says the billboard, which is the sign structure, which is the end point of the face here, like it was for Lamar, when you saw the note from them about the setback from the edge of the sign face. And the word curb does not appear in the ordinance anywhere. It refers to zoned property. And the zoned property is evident by both the the green line here that wraps around the area that I'm showing you, which is defined by the ordinance and the historic preservation ordinance, as well as the black dash line here that evidences the Winans Park. So let's look at the historic property aspect part of the definition here. Go on to the next slide, please. So we have the warranty deed from the Winans family to the city of Oklahoma City. And the next slide shows you how this property was platted and zoned. And this does represent the area that was zoned by the HP district, which I'll show you on the next slide. But this part here I want to show you, you see where the word park is, that's highlighted in yellow. Right above it, you can barely make out, but the rectangular portion shows 200. So it shows you that it's at this point in time, when this was platted and then acquired by warranty deed by the city from the Winan family, and the city still owns it in fee, there was 200-foot frontage across there that was the park. And now you can see, as you looked at our survey, how part of that is also a roadway. But now if you go on to the next slide, you can see by the definition here of ordinance number 21204, which is the ordinance we were provided by the city, has the HP ordinance that is at issue in this case. And as you can see, the language here actually says, Chapter 59, Section 1400 of the Oklahoma City Municipal Code, 1993, be amended to change the boundaries of the HP Historical Preservation and HL Historical Landmark Overlay Districts as shown upon the district map to include therein the following described property. The ordinance uses the word property for the HP. That is the same language in the sign ordinance as billboard is 300 feet from the HP zoned property. The language matters, the words matter. These words match the language in the sign ordinance. Now at the bottom of this HP Historical Preservation District descriptions that you see at the bottom, it says, property platted as Winans Park, bounded by Broadway Avenue, Northwest 20th Street, and Northwest 22nd Street. So this Historic Preservation District ordinance clearly defines the boundaries of the HP district, clearly says that everything within that district map is the following described property, which is the historic preservation property within that boundary. And that boundary matches the maps on the city's website. But just to really show how the language does all track, even the city's own ordinance regarding HP Historic Preservation District provides Historic Preservation District, all property within the city previously designated as Historic Preservation District as of October 21st, 1980, and all properties subsequently included within this district shall be subject to and comply with the regulations and restrictions of this section. The HP district is intended as a basic zoning district. So HP is a zoning district, it's not an overlay. All of the property within that zoning district is zoned HP. All of the property identified within the boundaries of the ordinance that we just spoke about is HP zoned property. And that district as identified, sites designated by the City Council as being within the HP district shall be identified on the official zoning district's map of the city and in all other official writings. So what does that mean? The two words, the two sections here. No billboards, which is a sign structure. The sign structure is anything on, above, or below the ground. Shall not be constructed, erected, placed, or replaced closer than 300 feet to the nearest HL or HP zone property. What is HP zone property? It is everything within the boundaries of the HP district identified on the city's own HP zoning map and on the city's website. And it's certainly everything within the boundaries of the Winans Park that was platted, purchased in fee by the city that is zoned HP. Because everything within the boundaries of the HP district is zoned property. That's what the city's own ordinance says. So let's go back to the survey one more time. Now, I just want to note, this is the only survey out of the 500, we are the only party to this proceeding that has presented to you a survey that shows the boundaries of any HP district or any HP zoned property. And that's because we had a professional surveyor that's licensed, certified, actually take these ordinances and plot them on this map. This is his words, not my words, not my client's words, but that of an independent professional. And what does he say? The warranty deed to the City of Oklahoma City, Book 107, page 395. That is the black dashed line here. That is the Winans Park that I showed you before, that's 200 feet across. That was platted and zoned HP and is now owned in fee by the city. But on top of that, he took ordinance that I read to you from previously, ordinance number 21204 from January 28, 1999, that changed the boundaries and expanded the boundaries of the HP zoning district in which all property, as the ordinance says, is zoned HP, and he platted that on here. And that is this green curved line, which also matches the HP line on the city's own website as provided by the city's own ordinances. And so even if you don't believe the definitions in the ordinance themselves that says a billboard is a sign structure and the sign structure is anything above, below, or in the ground, and you go from the center of the pole, they're still not 300 feet from the city's HP boundary as defined by the city's own ordinances, or 300 feet from the Winans property that's been platted and zoned and now owned by the city. So it's our position that simply based on the survey that we have shown to you, prepared by independent professionals, and the plain language of the sign code ordinance, that a billboard is to be 300 feet from HP zoned property, that this permit was inappropriately issued, and you, as the Board of Adjustment, as part of your responsibility, should overturn that decision and revoke and terminate that permit. Now, there have been other issues that you've heard us argue. I'm happy to answer any questions about those. We believe strongly that the spacing is a clear and unambiguous interpretation of the ordinance and should be grounds enough for you to vote to uphold our appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. And no one had signed up to speak on this. Did anyone from the audience want to speak on this case prior to?
Just me.
Just you, David.
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on the property rights holder that holds a permit currently that we believe was properly issued by the city. I think it's important that we table set this for Member Mitchelson, who hasn't, I guess, had to endure the hours of conversation. This is not like a normal Board of Adjustment case. Here, there is one entity in the room, that's the largest billboard operator in the state of Oklahoma. Another entity in the room, the smallest billboard operator in the state of Oklahoma, Ms. Kelly Lay, who's simply trying to get her first billboard. The third entity in the room is really the city of Oklahoma City. Lamar's not here asking you for something. Lamar is here asking you to tell the staff that the interpretation they made of their ordinance was improper. The interpretation that they made of their ordinance, which is consistent with decades of practice as to how they issue and review permits, was wrong. That's what we're here to do today. We would suggest that the city, their staff, the planning department, the legal staff, all of them were proper in their determination. Now, this board sees a host of things. Unfortunately, now it seems like you see nothing but special exceptions for home sharing. But there was a time in the past when you saw mainly variance applications. Variance applications are necessary when an application for something doesn't meet the language of the ordinance. Here, we submitted a permit to the city of Oklahoma City. We met with various departments, and only after we had an email that was dated June 24th, 2024, from Scott Wise, who's in the Development Center, did we find ourselves in a position of having a permit issued. For purposes of the record, I'm going to read it again. Again, Scott Wise, who is in the Development Center, emails Mr. Hahn, who's in my office, and says, Mr. Hahn, the Development Center, the Planning Department, and legal are in agreement that the billboard spacing is measured to the center line of the pole and that the distance is measured from the edge of the property, not the zoning district. Therefore, the distance is measured from the property line, not the center line of the street. It so far appears you meet both of these requirements, and as such, you will not need a variance from either. Therefore, the permit was issued. Now, one thing that Counsel for Lamar failed to address, of course, why would he, is when we are looking within Chapter 59, which is where the sign ordinance is housed, it tells us what we do when it comes to measurement. And what we find in Chapter 59 at Section 5240.4 sub C, it says, for purposes of applying the development regulations of an individual zoning district, all such requirements shall be calculated from the appropriate right-of-way line delineating a street or alley. Well, if we think about what that means, the right-of-way line that delineates a street or alley has to be the curb. That is why, if we go back to the email from Scott Wise, he tells us that it's measured from the edge of the property, not the zoning district. So when we are applying development regulations, which is what the city staff did, they applied the development regulations to the sign permit that they had in front of them. And their own ordinance tells them when we're applying development regulations, such requirements are calculated from the appropriate right-of-way line delineating a street or alley. We don't measure from the center of the street. We measure from the right-of-way line that delineates the street. There's not a right-of-way line in the center of Broadway Avenue that would delineate the street. The delineation of the street is undoubtedly a curb. When my children play out front, we tell them, don't go in the street. How do they know where the street is? That's where the curb is. The other side of the curb is the street. Our side of the curb is not the street. Therefore, it can be no other spot than the curb that tells us under 59, 5240.4 sub C, the curb is what delineates a street. I trust that you've all read all of the briefs that we've submitted. I don't want to belabor the points. In the previous hearings, we've talked a lot about the proximity of our sign to the railway and whether or not that mattered. For purposes of your inquiry, if you look at what is required, you have I-2 property here. I-2 zone property explicitly allows a non-accessory sign, which is otherwise known as a billboard. We have both frontage on 235, but also a major arterial, which under the sign code, Broadway Avenue is classified as, and therefore a sign is permitted either way, abutting Broadway Avenue or abutting 235. I would like at some point for Member Mitchelson to be able to hear staff at least explain why their analysis led them to this. I understand others have heard it, but perhaps it would be useful for you to hear why staff, after review of the permit, decided the ordinance is clear, decades of practice is clear, you meet the ordinance, therefore no variance is needed. Permit was issued. Now, in terms of spacing, Lamar notably has taken an image out of their slide deck that you've seen the previous times where it was a Lamar billboard that was a flag over buildings. Again, I struggle to understand why council wouldn't simply display the permit that's actually at issue here that shows it's not this ridiculous looking flag, and instead it's up against the pole. We don't protrude significantly over any building. But when we talk about spacing, the only provision within the sign code that describes how to measure spacing refers to the center of the pole. And again, if you look at the email from Scott Wise, who's the development, let's see, I'm not sure his title, but he is within the development center, he states, the development center, planning department, and legal are in agreement that the billboard spacing is measured from the center line of the pole. That's the way the ordinance contemplates it. That's the way that every other sign in our market, including all of Lamar's, have been measured when it comes to spacing. Not the edge of a sign face. It's the center line of the pole. Lamar is in here to keep out competition, no other reason. And they are doing it in a manner seeking to have you disrupt decades of practice of the city in a manner that is illogical, frankly. It's illogical, it flies in the face of the ordinance. And again, I will leave you with the provision when it comes to how to measure from the distance from an HP property. Chapter 59, 5240.4 sub C says, for purposes of applying the development regulations of an individual zoning district, here that regulation at issue would be separation from HP of 300 feet. All requirements shall, not may, but shall be calculated from the appropriate right-of-way line delineating a street or alley. Here it's a street, not an alley. The only way you can measure under the code is from the center of the pole to the appropriate right-of-way line delineating a street, which in this case is the curb along Broadway Avenue, where it becomes grass and therefore HP zone property pursuant to the ordinance, and we are more than 300 feet away from that. We would submit that the city did their job, as they've done for decades when reviewing sign permits, and properly issued this permit. We stand ready to answer any questions. Again, I would urge you to call on Lisa Cronister so she can explain independently of Lamar and my client how staff reviews this and all other permits and why they came to the conclusion that the permit application is fully compliant with all ordinance provisions, and only because of that did they issue the permit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? For me, I would like to have staff come up and kind of explain the chronological order of how they got to making the determination. Started with Lisa to legal to planning, or to the permitting desk.
Sure, Lisa Cronister, Assistant Planning Director. My primary responsibility over the past couple of years was the development of the new sign code. So from that respect, I was consulted by our staff and Development Services staff on the interpretation. And when I first got there, so staff, being Planning, Development Services, Municipal Counselor's Office, they had been discussing various interpretations for some time before they asked me as a kind of final arbiter of what everyone was discussing. And on measuring the billboard, I was surprised it was a question because I thought it was clear in the new sign code. The measurement of the spacing requirement is from the center of the sign support structure. So, and that is consistent with how staff has been doing it for as long as I've known. So that's the center line of the spacing in terms of where to measure from the 300 feet. Again, working with staff, including Municipal Counselor's Office, the interpretation was that 5250. So Chapter 59, 5250.4, for the purposes of applying the development regulations, which the sign code is, of an individual zoning district, all such requirements shall be calculated from the appropriate right-of-way line delineating a street, which is the curb. So we were looking at not the boundaries of the zoning district, but the boundary of the HP zoned property, which ends at the curb, because the street is not HP zoned property per se, even if the boundary in the ordinance goes out into it. So from our standpoint, it was clear. I agree with Mr. Hickman that the intent of the sign code and the comprehensive plan was to restrict billboards, and we did that in a couple of ways in the new code. We limited the height in several districts. We eliminated billboards from a few more districts. So that was how the new sign code addressed the comprehensive plan policies. And that's part of why we tied down all these distances and reaffirmed that 300 feet from HP and HL properties was appropriate. So any
And maybe just
questions?
say a little bit about how long it took to write the code and the stakeholders who were involved in that, which were the sign companies themselves.
Sure, we began work on the sign code in January of 2020, and it was adopted in February of 2024. In that time, we worked with residents, we worked with industry, we had several focus groups, including with Lamar. Focus groups with multiple billboard operators, focus groups based on community appearance with residents across the city.
Thank you. And just to say, I'm a little familiar with writing an ordinance. I've worked with Lisa on Planning Commission on the ADU ordinance, and I I said this many times during that process, that it's almost impossible, it is impossible to catch every single different aspect that could come up. And so the interpretation by whoever it is, staff, an applicant, is very important, but that interpretation is also their interpretation. And so that is why I wanted to hear from you and how you guys as staff got to where you got. And I believe that the legal team also were in agreement prior to the issuing of the permit.
Yes.
I do just want to address a couple of things. If you can go to my slide that has at the top of it 59-16111. It's further back. The other direction, towards the end. Yes, keep going. Yes, you went back, went too far. That one's up. Nope, not that one. I'm sorry. Keep going.
And we're looking at
the last slide.
59?
It's the very last slide, basically. Okay, maybe it's the simplest way of putting it. Sorry.
in the sign code?
Keep going. This is the last one. There it is. Okay. So just as a point of clarification, what you've heard from Mr. Box and from Ms. Cronister about the spacing and the way it has been done in the past is the spacing between billboards. This is a different section of the ordinance than the one that I showed you, which is what's applicable here, which is the spacing between billboards and HP zoned property. Now, in the general interpretation and construction of an ordinance like a statute, you're to interpret it as the legislative intent was intended in this plain language. Here, the plain language is that this is spacing between billboards. And it is clear that the measurement for spacing requirement is from the center of the sign support structure and following the curvature or geometry of the right-of-way. Okay. If we're doing a measurement between billboards, we're looking at the center of the sign structure, as you heard Mr. Box say and Ms. Cronister say. But in the new ordinance, we also have a section that deals with the billboard should not be 300 feet from the HP zoned property, which is the more direct, specific language that applies. And under the eyes of the law, as a quasi-judicial body, your obligation is to interpret this ordinance as it would be as if you were a judge, which means the more specific provision, not the more general provision, is the one that you should apply. And the more specific provision is the one that says billboards shall not be 300 feet from HP zoned property. It's not the one that says spacing between billboards, because we're not dealing with spacing between billboards. There's not a billboard sitting over there by the fire station at the curb that we're measuring from. If we were, it would be 1,200 feet, not 300 feet, which is what this section also says. No billboard shall be constructed, placed, or replaced closer than 1,200 feet to another billboard. The concept of measuring from the center of the billboard is not applicable to this case. Period. Rather, it's from the billboard, unless we're going to not read the entirety of the ordinance, which is a defined term of billboard, which neither Mr. Box or Ms. Cronister addressed, then that is the sign structure, whether it's above ground, below ground, or underground. And the city's even told Lamar it's 25 feet setback from the sign face, which is the part flying in the sky, and the part that I showed you on our survey that is within 300 feet of the HP zoned property, including going over the curb, just in the event that you thought that was the proper interpretation. And why do I show that picture? I don't know if it's a Lamar sign or not, it doesn't really matter. I show you that picture to show that a sign can be flagged and protruded a distance away from the center of the pole. Why do I show you that? Because your obligation also, I could read you the cases that will be presented to the court probably by either side, but certainly my side, if this goes to, which will, if you do not support our appeal, will happen, which is that an interpretation cannot be an absurdity as to what is intended. It's clear that the intent is that there be protection of 300 feet from HP zone property. If the structure can be flagged 100 feet, or let's say, with the sign face, a digital sign face, flashing bright lights within 200 feet of HP zone property instead of 300 because it's flagged and flying across the parking lot, that clearly creates an absurdity of the interpretation because it's not doing what was intended, which was to provide protection to the HP zone property from the billboard structure. That's why I show you that picture, to show that if you measure from the center of the pole, you allow for the circumvention of what was intended, which was the protection of the HP zone property, because someone could flag that structure a great distance potentially and nullify the language that provides for the spacing setback. So I just want to be clear, there's not decades of interpretation of the spacing that is at issue, which is the 300 feet from a billboard from HP zone property. If there was, it would be in your staff report. What there might be decades of is 1,200-foot spacing from billboard to billboard from the center of the poles. I'll acknowledge that. I'm willing to acknowledge that, yes. But that's not what we're talking about here today. You have to listen to the precision of the language that others are saying to you. Spacing the way it's always been done. Okay, billboard to billboard. I'll acknowledge that. Ask the question, has it been done that way from the center of the pole to HP zone property? And if so, what cases and what signs? I'm not aware of any, and I've been doing this for 25 years in this city. Maybe there's some out there I don't know of, but I suspect if they were out there, they would be in your report, just like I've seen it other times where there's examples provided about various heights or other things that might help to shed light to you as the people making that decision. And then finally, the issue was brought up about the development regulations. For the purposes of applying the development regulations of an individual zoning district, all such requirements shall be calculated from the appropriate right-of-way line delineating a street or alley. That's under the heading of official zoning district maps, delineation of zoning district boundaries. Well, what we're talking about here is the HP zone property. We're not talking about curves and delineation. This is when you don't know how to delineate a zoning district boundary. Rather, we're dealing with what is HP zoned property. And your own city ordinance says, the ordinance that created the historic preservation, that all the property within it is zoned HP. It's a zoning district. And it doesn't matter if it's now a road, an alley, a fire department, or grass that you can play soccer on. Everything within that boundary is HP zone property, period. Your city ordinance says that. It's on that map, just as it is on your city website, just as the ordinance says it shall be on the city website identifying the HP boundaries, and everything within it is HP zoned property. And just as a further point of clarification, as I told you last time, that Winans Park was deeded in fee with 200-foot width as it was originally platted to the city, which is owned in fee and is part of the zoned HP property. And if the city wanted to go out there and shovel dirt on it and move that curb, they could tomorrow. So the curb is not a set fixture that defines the delineation. The boundary does, and the boundary is that green map, or that green curved area here that goes around what was the Winans Park, or is the Winans Park, and whether you go 300 feet from the center of the pole or from the sign face, the furthest point, you cross over the HP boundary. And everything, as even the surveyor put, the independent expert put on here, HP district, everything within there is HP zone property per the city's ordinance itself. We would ask that you don't have to make a strange interpretation here. You just have to read the words and apply the city's own ordinances. And it's clear, with all due respect to the staff, and this is one of those times where this is a case of first impression, where we believe the staff made a mistake. And it's not anything to do with Lamar and the size of Lamar, as Mr. Box likes to always say, because this is a city that only enforces the ordinances through complaints. And so if Lamar wasn't here complaining, challenging, raising the issue, nobody else is going to do it. But that doesn't make it right, or it doesn't make it wrong that we're here. Your job is to interpret the ordinance and make the decision as to what is the proper interpretation. And it's important because this is a case of first impression. And how you interpret this is how it's going to be done in the go-forward basis. And is it going to be done as the words say from the HP district and the zone property? Are we going to create a new way of doing it that is not static, which is a curb, wherever that curb might be? Because what happens if that curb moves a year from now, 10 years from now? It's not going to change the decision today because it shouldn't matter. Thank you very much.
I'll be real brief. I think Mr. Hickman and I agree on something. We do think that your ordinance is clear. And it's not just our side that thinks it's clear, it's your staff that deals with this ordinance every single day when reviewing sign permits. What Lamar is proposing is a new way to interpret this and a new way to view sign permits. Not our way. Our way is staff's way. Our way is the way that the ordinance requires it to be read. To say that you measure to the center of a street defies the intent and the purpose of the ordinance. The purpose and the intent of the ordinance is to be 300 feet away from property that is used and enjoyed as HP. Broadway Avenue, the street, is not what was trying to be protected. The property, the grass, the spot in which you start to enjoy private property is what was intended to be measured against. Your ordinance tells us that it's to be calculated from the appropriate right-of-way line delineating the street. Well, you delineate the street with a curb. The only person here that can talk to the intent of the ordinance, as Mr. Hickman discussed, is Ms. Chronister. She was one of the lead authors of the sign code. And you heard her say it wasn't, well, we didn't know or we didn't think. It was a matter of fact. It is the sign structure, meaning the pole, and it is to the curb. She was unwavering that this was the intent, this is what we have always done, and this is the way it was done here. So we would ask you to deny Lamar's appeal, affirm the permit, affirm staff and their diligent efforts here, and affirm common sense. If we're talking about what is really the intent of the protection of a 300-foot separation, it is to get it away from property, not to get it away from the center line of a street. Thank you.
So anything from the board? And before we start, I believe that we're supposed to, we have 3 different decisions that we can make. We can affirm the administrative decision, we can reverse the administrative official decision, or modify. So I want to keep that in mind as we deliberate this. Who wants to go first?
I mean, I agree that words matter, and when you're looking at the ordinance as I read it, you're seeing subpart G, spacing between billboards, subpart H, spacing between districts and uses. I just can't personally myself get past the fact that it says 300 feet to the zoned property, and then when you go look at further up where it defines design, zoning, overlay districts, and historic preservation and historic landmark districts. Doesn't say to the curb, it doesn't say anything, it just says the actual districts as shown by the city, and what their interpretations they've taken, the conveyances that I've seen of record, I just can't get past that one. We didn't even address the issue of the right-of-way fee issue. If we're just strictly going by this, though, I don't think that we meet the 300-foot setback or distance between it from the sign, and not the sign structure, because subpart H does not anywhere in that part of the ordinance say to the center or the center of the pole. It says the billboard, and when you look at the definition of the billboard, which then says sign or structure, and go further and look at the definition of sign and sign structure, it's any part of that sign. Unfortunately, my interpretation, just based off of what I reviewed here, I don't see that we have the proper spacing. So I'm in favor of granting the appeal.
Very, very similar thought process. I think we can get into a slippery slope when we start trying to interpret the intent. I do appreciate staff showing up and providing color. I think that definitely helps. But especially when we're talking about a process that is a large collaborative process, like this update to the sign ordinance was, there's no way to know the intricate details of the collective thought of that group. So I don't want to go down that path. I have the code in front of me, and one thing I agree with Mr. Hickman on is I do think that I have a responsibility to try to interpret this as it is written, as if I were a judge. And so one of the things I'm having a hard time with is, from what I can see, the Winans Park was expressly added and used as part of the HP district. If that's the case, it gives that as a description. It gives the survey as an acceptable description for what could establish that HP district. I don't see any gray area there. I think that park was it. And unless there was something that was filed after the fact or some amendment that was made to the plat that changed those dimensions, I don't necessarily know that the curb being moved matters. I think it does a great job of outlining exactly the geography, the geographic limits of what was to be included in that HP district. I also, when I go read anywhere else about property, there's not this alternative definition of property. The property is anything that we've established within those areas. So I don't think that it has to be a structure. I don't think it has to be a house or a building or anything like that. It's just simply that property. The part that I guess you could say did get a little bit gray is in section 5250.4, which Mr. Box stated, for the purposes of applying that development regulations of an individual zoning district, all such requirements shall be calculated from the appropriate right-of-way delineating a street. This was an issue for me in the previous meeting. It was an issue for me in this meeting. I'm taking the approach that I don't think that expressly applies to the sign ordinance, particularly because the context around this language discusses lot sizes. If we continue on, it says, however, for calculating lot size requirements within the AA zoning district, the boundaries shall be calculated from the center line of abutting streets and roads. Now, the only reason that I'm bringing that up is because I think that it's clear that we're talking about something different. We're not talking about the application of spacing for billboards. It goes on further to say, for calculating the lot size requirements for mobile home residential within the R1 zoning district, the boundary shall be calculated from the center line of abutting streets and roads. I think that all of this language was included in here to give clear directions on what would be the demarcation point for applying zoning regulations when we're talking about development standards, not sign code. So for me, that's what I'm basing my decision to support the appeal on.
I'm last to speak on this. I want to thank everybody for their presentations, and even though I had conflicts with the other meetings, thankfully I was able to review the previous meetings and saw all of the arguments, and I've read the material, and I agree with my fellow commissioners, you know, regarding the HP zoning, and I haven't heard anything that really successfully challenges that. So I would support the appeal.
Mr. Chair, may I real quick? Trying to read the room here, I guess what I would ask is, what would my client do? Because you guys are now going to say that a variance would be needed. What would we be varying?
The 300 feet?
Okay, and how would we calculate where that line is?
I'm not going to attempt to give legal advice to your client or you, but just as an individual looking at this, I would think that you would need a variance from the sign face. That's not been a particular issue for me simply because I feel like this is such a glaring issue, but I would think you would need a variance from the 300 feet as calculated from the sign face to the edge of the plat that was used in identifying the HP district. So going back to that language that identified that district, I also think, not that any of this matters, but I also think that even if we were to apply that language in Section C of 5250.4, where it talks about the appropriate right-of-way delineating a street, an argument can be made as long as, if you guys are not challenging, which I didn't hear you challenge, if you guys are not challenging that plat was to be used as the defining geography for the HP district, how would the curb on the east side of the road not be the curb delineating that street? And again, that's neither here nor there, but I would think that you'd be asking for a variance to the 300, from the 300-foot requirement from the sign face to the edge of the HP district as defined by the plat.
Yeah, and I'm not asking for legal advice, right? Like what I'm trying to get to is, when you don't meet an ordinance, staff tells you you don't meet the ordinance and here's why, and we're required to express the size of the variance. Here, you guys are telling staff you're wrong in how you read your ordinance. So I need to know, for purposes of submitting an application, what am I varying and by how much?
Well,
because we would typically get with legal, we'd get with staff. You guys are telling them they're wrong.
Well, I disagree with that statement. Even overall, there's clear notes from Development Services when they initially rejected the permit. So as you all know, Oklahoma City is a thriving city. It takes a lot of people to make this work, and somebody read that initially and interpreted it differently. Now, there was some communication, there was some discussion, which I think highlights the complexity of this issue, because at one point, you had individuals in the city say that this doesn't meet the sign ordinance, and then at another point, upon further review, there was some discussion that determined, yeah, we think you do meet it. So I don't think that it was this, across the board acceptance from the city where they said, hey, this is perfect, this falls squarely in line with this box, we're gonna sign off on it, and we're now coming back saying, no, you guys have interpreted that wrong. I think that it was much more hairy than that, for lack of a better term, where you have plan reviewers looking at this saying, hey, we don't think this meets it, rejecting that, and then coming back, no doubt, upon you all reaching out to the appropriate parties and saying, let's have a discussion, and then ultimately the decision that they might have come to is, yeah, we don't think that you need one. But I don't see this as something that was clear cut from the beginning, where all of city staff just adopted it and accepted it as it was.
So there was one staff member who was told by all other staff members that she was wrong in how the provision that she cited.
Right, and I don't think it was rejected. I think it was actually permitted with the idea that they had to get and show a site plan that
Correct.
met the criteria.
So, and you're correct. I don't mean rejected in the sense that it was, but it was a condition. It was a condition that had to be met prior to a permit being.
And then we submitted the survey to show it, and it was approved.
But you submitted the survey, and there was also a decision to deviate away from that original assessment that it was from the sign face, because that was part of some of the commentary.
Well, I mean, okay. So I want to make sure it's clear. The position of the board is sign face is the method of measurement, and it's distance from sign face to plat is what we would seek the variance from.
That's not the ordinance, that's the way I read it.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak for them, but yes, the way I interpret it, I believe that the HP district is defined by that plat. I also believe that the appropriate place for the measurement to be taken, it would be from the sign face.
Okay.
So you want to make a motion?
Do we have to, as part of the motion, discuss why, or just a straight motion?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to make a motion to, I guess, uphold.
Reverse the administrative decision, correct?
Right, no, grant the appeal.
Yeah, but,
You're going to
okay,
grant
but
the
it
appeal.
said in the docs,
It said what?
in the documents of what we could or should do with this. By the action by the board. So to reverse the administrative decision would basically be granting the appeal.
Yeah, so making a motion in case number 15736 to grant Lamar's appeal of the administrative decision and thereby reversing the admin's decision.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Maybe. He got you. And that passes.
Thank you. Be excused.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
No judge. It comes to the end of the docket. Any additional items?
I do have a question. As far as home sharing, we had a couple today that were in a multi-purpose dwelling unit. Are we supposed to interpret that at all from a single family?
We have the actual expert right here in the room if she wants to come up. Lisa Conister. This is a home sharing question. Didn't know you were doing double duty today, huh?
So my question's this. A lot of times we're getting people where they lived in a single family home and now they want to allow some home sharing. But we're getting a lot of these multifamily 6, 8 units or apartment complexes allowing, asking for that to be Airbnb'd or short term. Is there anything in the language that we need to consider that separately? Because I just feel like the concentration, and obviously with this proposed changes coming up, if it gets passed, there's going to be a limit to it. But in the interim, we're supposed to consider that separately, because if you've got a place for 8 and 4 of them.
So right now there is a moratorium on that, which is including the 10% rule. So it's 10% of any dwelling units on any one block. So it is encompassing the
going to have that moratorium, but if let's say there's an 8-door multifamily unit and one of them applies, I think we're still going to see that application, right?
Are you talking about in the proposed new home sharing
Well,
ordinance?
yeah, I'm just wondering if it's something to consider in the future, that if we start seeing, in the hotel, that I still consider a hotel from a year ago, where someone built, 8, 10 units, and now they want to Airbnb all of them. That's where I kind of want to draw a line of, I don't feel comfortable. I don't think the intent was for that.
Sure. So Lisa Chronister, Assistant Planning Director, the proposed new ordinance that was heard at council that was recommended by this body included 10% limit on non-host occupied units. And one reason we went for a percentage limit instead of a spacing limit was to accommodate multi-dwelling buildings. Forgot my next point on that.
No, as long as it was considered.
So since it is in Chapter 59, an applicant could request a variance to the 10%.
Right. And also, if there's a row of apartment buildings that are addressed separately, so there's 10, 10, 10, 10, a whole building could get there if it was within the 10% of the dwelling units per block.
Yeah, because the 10% was to...
But we would still have purview.
Yeah, was to also help manage across different densities of the city. Because, as you got toward downtown, where there's many more dwelling units, there would be statistically more home shares, but still not over the 10%.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, and I have another, not necessarily on that point, but we talked briefly about some of the variance requests that we're likely to start seeing on the sign ordinance. And I don't know how you guys feel about us adding an agenda item. I know we have the holidays, it didn't have to be this year, but at some point adding an agenda item to revisit some of the statutory standards that we're supposed to be reviewing when we get these variances. I think the statement that was made last time is we don't want to just completely undermine all of the work that staff has done on some of these ordinances. And I'll say for me personally, I think that we're going to see a number of requests for variances to the sign ordinance, and I think that the essential hardship is going to be the fact that the new sign ordinance is more restrictive. If I adhere to it, nobody's going to be able to see my sign. And if we just go as things are currently going, we're going to be inclined to say, okay, well, let's grant that. So and if we do that, that completely undoes all of the work of the sign ordinance. And then it was brought up in this last case, how we acknowledge the fact that there was an effort to reduce the number of billboards. And so if we take the approach now that a hardship is because I can't have a billboard here, are we not just this dog chasing our tail, altogether? So I think a collective discussion on what constitutes a hardship. And not only that, I was paying particularly close attention to the language today, and it says that the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would create an unnecessary hardship. So this assumes that there are going to be some hardships that are necessary, reading between the lines. So I think that we have an even further burden of, the onus is on us to determine that this is not only a hardship, that you've met that requirement, but that it's not one that's necessary or intentional.
Mm-hmm. We can get together, staff, we can all get together and see about some kind of a training session, maybe?
Yes, it's on my to-do list to, one, organize some sign code training for this body. It occurred to Sarah after the last meeting, a meeting or two ago, there were several sign code appeals. It occurred to us that this group, as much as we had communicated about the sign code, we had done hardly any communication with this group. So I want to organize a study session type meeting like we did for home sharing several weeks ago. So hold that to describe the premise and some of the key changes of the sign code. So that's one. Also, earlier today, Steph and I were discussing our annual committee and commissioner training and what that might look like. And out of that, we want to hold a separate workshop with the board, hopefully led by Municipal Counselor's Office, about the statutory criteria, just
That would be good.
broadly and more detailed speaking. We probably need 2 different workshops for each of those topics, but we'll try to set those up as soon as possible.
I think to go along with that, as far as some of the variants that we've granted this year, I am extremely concerned that we are getting a lot of variance requests, especially when homes are being built, that are all the way at the very end. And I don't know what can be done in that process, because as you were talking, an unnecessary hardship. Well, if you poured the foundation in the wrong location, that's not necessarily unnecessary. That's at your own fault. And I feel that I'm not sure how much more I want to allow those types of requests. And I mean, I hear the stories, right? Some businesses may go bankrupt as a result of it. But at some point, we've got to hold people accountable so that for the most part, neighborhoods are generally, going to at least keep their same, the same environment, same feel, right? And we, in particular, there was one, I think, out in Mustang that just stuck out like a sore thumb. So that's definitely concerning, but at some point, I just need to figure out what is a necessary hardship. Is pouring the foundation, does that even qualify to get to that point? But to go along with realizing that it is a new city ordinance code, we've interpreted a certain way. Laws are passed every year. And so I know that there's an alien affidavit statute that passed a year ago, went to effect November 1st of 2023. We didn't know how to interpret it, and county clerks all over the state were interpreting separately. At some point, we had to get an attorney general's opinion to tell us here's how to interpret it. I don't know if that's something, Mr. Box was asking what can be done. I just think there's there's still some ambiguity apparently, despite all the efforts that were made to try to make things clear. I think potentially that it's still ambiguous enough that it may require a change in the future to the sign code to kind of, further define how things are supposed to be set out. And I think ultimately, that type of clarity is what's going to give the staff and everyone, let them know what rules we're playing by. And I think that ultimately, that's something that needs to be considered.
No, absolutely. We had assumed that various types of cleanup would be identified in the months after the ordinance went into effect, and that has been the case, and we do have a list, and the center line of the pole and the edge of the district are on that list of cleanup. I need to look at the list and see how much is on there and when we might bring it through.
The ordinance in itself was written to tighten the sign ordinance up and to clear up sign clutter. And just by nature, this board is then going to see additional variance requests. Same thing in the ADU. I was thinking in the back of my mind the whole time we're doing that is we're going to see additional requests. Same on the home share, additional requests. And that's why I said it before, writing an ordinance is very difficult. Creating an ordinance that works for everyone is impossible. So getting good interpretation, getting legal definition is going to help.
Yeah, you're reminding me something Mr. Uday or Mr. Seda brought up about, is competition is a hardship because you can't see my sign because of my neighbor's sign. We met with a business and sign industry on many occasions, and we addressed many of those concerns in the new sign code. Now, I can go over that more in our training, but for example, an early idea from residents and some policymakers was to no longer allow pole signs But the main argument on that was, well, if my neighbor who was built last year gets a pole sign and I don't, that's a competitive disadvantage. So we got a lot of comments like that from industry and business that we have embedded in the code. So from that standpoint, I hope we've addressed that concept sufficiently.
I'd like to make, a comment, and I would just like to take this opportunity to thank staff and everyone involved for taking the time, and I can certainly appreciate all the hard work that has gone into creating the sign ordinance. And no matter what it is, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. You cannot possibly plan for everything. And I think in this particular instance, we've learned of something, and I consider it, the discussion and everything to be unique to these circumstances. So yes, we've learned from that, and we will learn from that going forward. And I do appreciate the comments that my colleagues have made about, I guess a question that I have is, what right is there? Is there some sort of right to be able to put a sign on your property to advertise? Is there? That's a little bit different than, the right to maybe have a dwelling and to have shelter or something of that nature. But the right to have a particular sign on a particular piece of property, I think we do need to take into account the totality of whatever the circumstances are. And if we do in fact have the right to try to make some modifications or take those situations into account, that we need to be clear on what those boundaries are. And again, not just open the floodgates and undo all the hard work, as you said, of whatever the situation is. That's always a moving target. But again, if we have these training sessions and learning sessions or whatever, at least that will help us to be better informed as we move forward.
And I wanted to thank you also, and maybe suggest quarterly or every 6-month update training so that this body understands the work that's being done in the trenches and can make decisions based on the intent of staff. It may get rearranged once they review it, but at least they'll know what you intend.
Yeah. So your second quarter training will be on accessory dwellings.
Thank you, Lisa.
There are no board committees, I don't believe. And anything else from any board members? Municipal Counselor's Office? Any other business? And we are adjourned.